Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I'm one of your hosts, Sami, Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. And today we're going to be talking about the holiday that we're celebrating here in America on today, Independence Day, 4th of July. Whoop, whoop. Angela, this is, if I believe correctly, have my notes right, this is one of your favorite holidays?
It
Yes?
is one of my favorite holidays. There's probably some question about it's just halfway through the year. It's your middle of the summer. We also, July 1st is Canada Day. So it's a whole celebration week. Perhaps maybe that is it. I have always been a giant American Revolution nerd. And so all that stuff, like, dude, people signed a piece of paper, and if they would have lost the war, they would have gotten hung as traitors. That takes bravery. That takes courage. I'm all about freedom. So, yeah, I love this holiday. I'm also pretty patriotic. I have a huge history of military service in our family. My brother served for 20 years. I have cousins, my uncle, my grandpa. Like, anyway, lots and lots of military service. So, give me a Lee Greenwood song, and I'm going to be crying right there in the middle of the fireworks every time.
Speaking of fireworks, that is why this is also my favorite holiday. Definitely probably should have like a more sentimental reason that it's my favorite holiday, but really it's just because I'm a pyromaniac at heart and blowing stuff up is super fun. And there's not a lot of times where you can like reasonably and without judgment set things on fire and blow stuff up, except for 4th of July. So it's a really good expression of my pyromania. And thankfully my husband is also this way. Each year we have to really try hard not to spend too much money on 4th of July. It's just to basically burn our money hours later. In any case,
That reminds me, speaking of fireworks, dude, the wedding that I went to in England, one of my favorite parts was there was like a 10-minute fireworks show. It was legit. Very, very cool. Way to go. Anna Bradbury on fireworks at her wedding. It was nice.
very cool. Super fun. So freedom today is sort of our topic, and on the brain because of the holiday, but also on the brain because of your book. That
Ah!
What's tomorrow, Angela? What exciting thing could happen tomorrow related to your book? I'll let you announce it. I don't have to share your good news.
You know what's funny is that we record these podcasts a little bit in advance, and so there's only like minor sweating of going like, yeah, tomorrow's going to be pre-orders are going to start. I mean, Amazon has to cooperate and all the places have to cooperate, but the plan is that on July 5th, my book will be available for pre-order.
Woo! So exciting. Wow, wow, wow.
Oh, we're gonna not talk about all the nervous system responses going on in my body right now.
Yeah, just dance it out. Dance it out. Just, feel your emotions. Let them flow out of you.
Yes, sweating. I put on a jacket because I was cold, and now wishing I didn't.
So, yes, if all
Yeah.
goes according to plan, and if not, then you'll see on the social media. We'll have at least on July 5th an announcement of when pre-orders,
Right.
if it's not on July 5th. But assuming all of the powers that be cooperate, tomorrow you will be able to pre-order Traveling Light by Angela Belford.
Okay.
Did you just say wow?
Yep.
Are you okay? Tell us
Yeah.
what's happening. What's coming up for you?
I mean, this has been a long journey.
Mhm.
It's been a very, very long journey. It has, I mean, it started in, March of 21. And so I can't think about the finish line without thinking about the starting line. And um, there were so many times when I thought I would just throw it down and give up, which those long-term listeners know that I did once actually threw away a manuscript. So I mean, I thought, well, I'll just wait a couple of more years. And so that it's finally here is just a little bit overwhelming. And there's an element, I had, you're a long-term listener, that all of 2022, we said, it's coming this fall, it's coming this fall, in 60 days, in 90 days. Just kidding, not happening. And so that's hard when you're like a professional development person and you're all about goal setting. It's super hard to like be so open and out there about your goals, and then to have to like pull them back and be like, we didn't meet the deadline. And October 10th, 2022. And so here we are, like the official published date will be August 29th, 2023. And so there's relief. It's finally here. There's joy that it's finally done. There's an element of like, that's adorable. You think it's done. It means you just got to the starting line, right? So like you spend all of this time and effort, and we've talked on the podcast about just all of the loneliness of being an author. And then now we get to promote the book and talk about it and hope that it is going to resonate. So one part is like relief, one part is scared. The other part of me is super joyful because I have had a couple of people do some advanced reader work on it, and specifically a client that's been a coaching client for 6 or 7 months, and their feedback has been just water for my dry soul, and the things that have resonated with them and how they feel like it has been helpful already, and how they felt like it really aligned with the coaching that I've done. That has been super encouraging. I had a psychologist friend of mine read it and get affirmation that it is psychologically sound, what I'm teaching. I only believed her because she told me on page 179 I was talking about the amygdala wrong. So therefore I fixed that. And if you look at it now, those of you trying to look it up, there won't be a 179 when we get to the final. But anyway, the fact that she like gave me such specific feedback, then I trusted the rest of her praise. So anyway, yeah. So freedom from the like constant need to like write and edit and write and edit and write, and freedom, woo, promotion, because promotion is more extrovert work.
Yeah. Might you say freedom from the crap in your head?
Freedom from the crap in my head. That might be what I have done. Free myself from the crap in my head. And, it's always a journey. And so it's not like I have zero crap in my head. But when I think back to the just debilitating role that my inner critic had on me, despite lots of success in my life, and what I experience now, just the ability to think without like constant bombardment of negative thoughts and questioning, it's so freeing. It literally is just walking around lighter. And I can't help but share that.
Yeah, you told me a fun metaphor I feel like you should share again. It's like a kid who gets a trampoline.
Yes. Seriously. Like, oh my gosh, I've just got the most fun toy on the planet. It's called trampoline. And you should come over to my backyard and you should jump on the trampoline. And there is in a little bit like a trampoline. Like I can remember my very first concussion, I think. I think it was a concussion. Anyway, whatever. Not that my parents took me to the doctor, but certainly a case of whiplash came on trampoline. I was having a ton of fun. And then all of a sudden, you're jumping on a trampoline with a bunch of ninth grade football players and you fall down. It can be bad. We'll just say.
Sure.
So anyway, this is not to say that this journey that we're about to embark on is all fun, because if you've ever gotten motion sick on a trampoline, if you've ever hurt yourself on a trampoline, I'm not saying that there's not risks, but it is a ton of fun.
Yeah.
The results are at least worthwhile.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk a little bit more about the freedom that you kind of hope for other people to get from this book or even just from the process. I know on the cover, if you've not had a chance to see the cover, it says, it does still say, right? Yeah. At
Yeah.
least, yeah, it says freedom from the crap in your head. So when I said that earlier, that's because that is on the front cover of this
It
book.
actually, no, it's tweaked. It's free yourself.
Ah, free yourself.
Free yourself from the crap in your head. Because you can't just read the book and get freedom. You actually have to free yourself. You have to, make friends with your fear. You have to go on your hero's journey. It is not a simple matter of insight. It is a matter of applying this to your life. I do think that there are some people that, even just in general conversation with me, I've given them some like nuggets from the book and they're like, whoa. And you can tell that little nugget has helped them. So I would like to talk about the two different types of freedom that I think that I hope people will get from this book. I know we're supposed to do things in parts of 3 and maybe a third one will come up, but the primary two types of freedom that I want to talk about is, number one, freedom from the just debilitating inner critic. And the second is freedom from, I would say, other people pushing your buttons on your remote control. I like to think about your emotions, not your emotions. I like to think about the way we react in the world. I think a metaphor for that is a remote control, and when people push your buttons and it activates you or triggers you. Those are the two types of freedom that I really hope to help people with. So which one do you want to
Yeah.
unpack first?
Let's talk about the remote control.
So for starters, um, the I think that when I started this process, and whatever started this process looks like, because you could go all the way back to 1998 when I had my, nervous breakdown. You could say back in 2007 when I quit my job to kind of explore who I was and kind of do some healing work. Or you could look at, the last 3 years. So there's been definitely different chapters of healing for me. But when I started, I would say that my emotional control, my emotional intelligence was like one of those all-in-one remotes, the big giant ones that will control your DVD player, your stereo, your TV. I know kids are like going, what? What are you talking about? But imagine just going to your grandparents' house and there's those giant remote controls that have like 97 buttons on. Nobody knows what they mean or what they're for. They're programmable, the all-in-one. But that used to be, there was a lot of opportunities for people to push my buttons and kind of make me feel bad about myself.
It
And
sort of makes me think of the quote, no one can make you feel inferior unless you let them. It's something
yeah,
about that.
yeah,
And yet also there are times where you could then hear that quote and then be like, well, what's wrong with me that I let somebody else make me feel inferior? Like,
yep.
I don't know.
Yeah. And in Be Freaking Awesome, I introduced this drawbridge analogy where I say, this thing where people are no one can make you feel. And I used to think that was total crap. I was like, yeah, they can. Like, my husband does this thing and then I feel this way. It's like cause and effect. Right. And what I learned is that the drawbridge analogy, if you were to go into the Amazon rainforest and you brought somebody out that had lived for generations in the Amazon rainforest and you took them to a drawbridge and a boat came down the river and the drawbridge came up and the boat came down the river, drawbridge came up, you would ask the person that had lived in the Amazon rainforest for their whole life, for generations, what caused the drawbridge to go up? Well, of course, the boat. If the boat didn't come down, then the drawbridge. Now, you and I, coming from an industrial society, know that it's not the boat. The boat is the trigger. And what brings the bridge up is the engine. When I learned this idea, I remember saying to my husband one time, you can just float your boat on down the river. I am not going to let you get me angry this time. And I really began to understand that someone can say something that's an event, and then I have to respond. I have an opportunity to respond. And when I respond and I add my response to the event, that gets you the outcome. E plus R equals O. It's in Be Freaking Awesome. And so that was kind of where I first started learning that idea. And what I would say that is a little bit different with traveling light is that not only do I now understand that I have control of the drawbridge, I have control of I have the ability to respond, but furthermore, as I have cleared away these toxic waste barrels of just stored up emotions, then my remote control now looks a little more like a Roku remote. It just has the 6 or 8 basic buttons, a power, up and down, whoever paid to have their name put on there so that I could automatically quickly
1 or 2 shortcuts,
1 or 2 shortcuts. Right. And that's, to me, that's perfect analogy because I have 3 beautiful, wonderful adult children, and they know exactly. They have shortcuts. They know exactly how to get to me. And when they push that button, I have to burn an inordinate amount of self-control to not let my automatic response jump in. Right. So
What's
it's
funny
funny.
is that I also feel like I so like in talking about this book launch stuff, and I'm working on helping plan a launch party, and I was like, oh man, I bet I could make her cry. And like the good kind of cry, like the warm, fuzzy cry. And do you want to know why I know that I can make you cry? Because I know exactly which button to hit that will like speak to your heart in just the right way, that will be soothing and warm and fuzzy. Like, so that it can work on the opposite side too, that
Oh,
it doesn't have to be an activating, but I know exactly which button to hit to make it like hit you right in the feels. And not that that's a good thing. I do want to clarify that's still probably something in me. And it's not that I'm like, oh, I want to make her cry, but there is a part that I do want to help communicate the impact and really make sure that you take a moment and appreciate the impact that you're having. And I know that you taking that moment to appreciate the impact gets you every time.
a little bit like a Lee Greenwood sign. I'm a little bit pre-Pavlovian response.
Yes.
Um,
So you can, I was like, somebody can
yeah,
hit shortcuts in like a good way, and it doesn't have
yeah,
to be in a
yeah.
bad way.
Yeah, my favorite metaphor that I've explained to someone recently is like if you walk around with the belief about yourself that I'm not enough, then somebody else, I mean, you just like put out like 12 to 15 different buttons on your remote control that anybody can push to activate the belief and to make you believe that it's true that you're not enough. I mean, in Be Freaking Awesome, we talked about this as green hair, right? If somebody says, oh my gosh, you have green hair, it's not going to bother you because it's not true. But if you secretly are a little bit nervous about that, and so I talked about that then, but now what I'm doing in this book is really unpacking the beliefs and kind of teaching people how to really clear those out. And so then you transplant the belief I'm not enough to I am enough. The example I used is like if you believe you're not enough and then you come home from dinner and your wife says, hey, did you pick up the milk? Oh my gosh, I suck. I'm horrible. You're right. Dude, all they did was ask you to pick up the milk. Now, they could also have some of their own buttons and they could like, oh my gosh, I'm not a priority to you, blah, 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 blah. This is when disaster strikes, is when our buttons kind of, you get like a little bit of baking soda, a little bit of vinegar, and boom. But if you transplant that belief and you now believe I am enough, then you come home and you're like, hey, did you pick up the milk? Oh my gosh, honey, I'm so sorry. I totally forgot. You just get to
Mhm.
be a human who forgets sometimes. And then you can fix it. Do you need me to go right now? Can we go after dinner or can I bring it home tomorrow? And they could be like, oh, well, actually, we can get through dinner. We'll just run out after dinner. Or, oh, I don't need it tonight. Well, the kids need it tomorrow morning for cereal. So then you can just go through a decision making process and you haven't turned baking soda and vinegar into this little, volcano experiment in your house. So that's one kind of freedom, is just the fewer negative beliefs you have about yourself, the easier it is for you to navigate life without other people stepping on your buttons, stepping on a landmine that might be protecting some toxic waste dump that has been down
Yeah.
there mixing things around and waiting for an explosion.
I want to add, I think my favorite metaphor, which I know is not your favorite metaphor at all on this, but
Mhm.
you are the one who started it, so I'm going with it.
Go with it.
Sometimes other people have their buttons pushed for whatever reason. And it's basically like if you were walking your dog and your dog pooped and you like, put it in a little bag and then they just throw that bag at you. Like sometimes people throw their emotional garbage your direction. You can catch it and be like, what the heck? And like now you have to deal with this. You can watch it fly by and be like, well, that was kind of gross, but like, okay, what do you have going on that you just threw a bag of poop at me? Or sometimes it can hit you, because I think that there are times where and I use this as that like somebody else's emotions can impact you whether you chose to catch it or not, and we still have to deal with that and process that and sometimes and figure out how to respond, how to clean
Yep.
ourselves up and go through that even when we didn't choose. Sometimes we do choose to catch it and get right in the middle of it, and then now we're all dealing with this and it's really not great, and
Yeah, there
sometimes it
are
hits you.
absolutely things that people say that just hurt.
Right.
Like, that's just hurtful. And I think that probably where I was at before this journey and kind of after Be Freaking Awesome was, well, nobody can make you feel anything, which there's truth. And people say things that just like, I mean, wow, that hurt. And it's okay. This is what I think I've come to with this book, is to say, let's just stop for a minute and take care of your inner child, your heart, however you want to think about it, the little girl you, little person you, and just say, whew, that hurt. They had their own thing. They've got their own reasons. I don't know why they're throwing around their emotional dog poop. I want to take care of me. And so that hurt. I want to cry for a minute. I want to, I want to do whatever that I need to feel that hurt, notice what's going on in my body, like let it fully come out and let it just like, and what's so great is that whether you cry or or you want to go for a walk, or you want to punch a pillow, you want to scream, whatever it is, keeping and deciding that you're not going to pick up that emotional poop and throw it back at them, that emotional dog poop. Um, golly, you know how much I hate poop, so this is really difficult for me to keep using this metaphor, but
I know, that's why I think it's so fun.
so I say regularly, like, never mind.
This is hold on, just a quick tangent. This is giving me a little bit of like a throwback to one time when I played Cards Against Humanity with my mother-in-law, and it was like with family, and I very on purpose just picked cards that did not relate to her card at all. I just wanted it to be like the most inappropriate thing for her to have to read out loud, because it was sort of humorous for me to kind of watch her squirm. I love you, Melinda. I know you listen to the podcast, and I don't think I've ever told you that story that I did that on purpose, but every now and again, it's just sort of
Which I
fun to be
think
like,
I just heard you say, I know a button I can push. Hee hee hee. Push. And
anyway, so
you
now,
weren't doing it to be hurtful. You were doing it to entertain yourself, which is
yes,
also a thing, right? Like
like
somebody
me
can
talking about poop.
say somebody can say something and you could be like, wow, that really hurt me. What's interesting is that that person could say the same thing to you, Sammy, that they said to me, and it may not register as hurtful to you.
Mhm.
Is like, and you're like, it, I, I don't know. it doesn't seem hurtful. There are a lot of things that people get really upset about that I'm just like, not my issue. That doesn't, and what I think I have made the mistake of before is that I discount their response because I don't understand why it's hurtful to them.
Yeah.
And I think it's okay to say, wow, that seems really hard for you. How can I be helpful right now? What do
Well,
you need? Or is there something you need from me? Do you need me to give you space to feel that feeling? Do you need a hug? Do I need to apologize? How can I help if I've been hurtful and there was no intent behind the hurt?
right. And I think that sometimes even it can be helpful to think about when other things are sort of happening to us or things are being thrown at us, that doesn't have to mean anything about you.
Nope.
Like somebody else doing something and saying something mean and hurtful doesn't have to mean that you're not enough or you're not worthy or
Yeah.
whatever it might mean. I don't belong. It doesn't mean any of those things. It really probably, I know that like our moms told us this, that when somebody's bullying you or being mean to you, it says more about them than about you. They say that because it's true, because it is saying more about them that this is the way that they're reacting to things.
Hmm.
And it still hurts. We can tend to ourselves, tend to the needs that we have from that. And it doesn't have to mean anything more about us.
It also, I mean, we also get to then decide how we want to react,
Yeah.
because we can simply say, that was kind of a hurtful thing to say, or that hurt me.
Mhm.
I felt hurt when you said that.
Sometimes I think for me, there can be different kinds of responses. There can be the compassionate response to be like, wow, what hurt do they have that this is how they're reacting to
Yes.
others?
Yep.
There can also be, I need a boundary set. And I can still have compassion for what hurt do they have that is causing them to hurt others in this way, while also saying, like, okay, this may not necessarily be the safest person. And maybe I'm not going to open up about things in ways that they could actually hurt me on purpose and more intentionally. Like, I'm not going to give them more buttons. And that's okay to
Mhm.
know that some people are not the most trustworthy with those buttons.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I'm
We
feeling
talked a
that
lot.
this
Go ahead.
I'm gonna snippet this part out, and like we're gonna need it a lot in 2024 with an election year. Um,
Uh,
just like, yeah, people are gonna say things, and you get to decide what they mean. And there are things that people say that I think probably years ago would have seemed hurtful to me that may not be. And if you think about it in the way of physical injury, when you sprain your ankle, you break an ankle, and you're healing, and somebody bumps you, it does hurt a lot because you're still in that healing process. And then once you're stronger and it's just a scar, they can bump you and it doesn't actually register. So there could be some elements of this, like our response. One of the biggest messages I say in the book is that um, your emotions are just an opportunity to respond. So when you feel that hurt, when you feel those any kind of sensations come up, it's just an opportunity to get curious and to check it out and to see what's going on. Oh, that's interesting. Why did I think that was hurtful? What about that? Where's that coming from?
we talked a lot about freedom from people being able to push your buttons.
Yep.
You mentioned a second kind of freedom, freedom from the inner critic in your head. We've talked about the inner critic a little bit before, but tell
Yeah,
us more.
we're going to probably talk about the inner critic a lot over the next few months. But the what I would say is that as we have, adopted these beliefs, I'm not enough, I don't have what it takes, I'm not lovable. I think the inner critic is serving as the file room manager, if you will, and that it's scanning the horizon to find any opportunity to keep you from getting hurt again. And so ironically, your inner critic is there to keep you safe. It's serving a role. It's done its job very effectively because you're still here. You survived every hard thing that's happened. And so often people want to like ditch the inner critic and get rid of it. And I say, well, that's not necessarily that effective because your survival mechanism in your brain is not going to actually let you do that. What
I
I,
feel like, so just to interject, sometimes when
yeah,
people say, I want to kick the inner critic out, like kick him to the curb, when you then face something that is unsafe, you give your inner critic ammunition to say, see,
you
you
need me.
need me.
Yep.
I need to be here. You can't live without me.
Yep.
Different to fire them and then have to try to rehire them than to just say, maybe
Yeah.
you're demoted. You're not the board chair anymore.
Yeah. And so also if they are the file room manager, right? And we have all these files that are like incomplete files that tell us that we're not enough and that we're not lovable. Well, if we can like complete some emotional cycles and get rid of those files and replant the belief, I am enough, I have what it takes, then your inner critic has a lot less files to keep up with. So therefore their role is greatly diminished, and it really is just coming online when you need to be actually kept safe. I wonder if I should jump off the bridge. No, probably not. Maybe.
Are you
Maybe if
attached to a
there's
bungee cord?
are you attached to an bungee cord? Are you over a big thing of water? Then yes, maybe you could jump off a bridge. Funny, we live in Arkansas. Clearly, jumping off bridges and rock faces is absolutely a way that we are entertained. But typically those are above water. So it's just a
Well,
way.
and it always throws off the whole thing. If your friends jumped off a cliff, would you jump too? I'm like, I don't know. How high's the cliff? Are we gonna have some fun this weekend? Like, what lake are we jumping into?
Yeah, depends on
Maybe
the
I'll
lake.
jump off with my friends or they're doing it.
But your inner critic would hopefully notice, is the water deep enough for how far you would
Yeah.
fall? Is your, and so that's when there is just a lot smaller responsibility. If you can just imagine the need for a file room critic manager in the 80s before computerized files, right? It was a very big job keeping up with all that paper. And in the same way, we just want to reduce the amount of paper that's kind of outstanding, how to put those things, mark them as complete, archive those files so that you just give the inner critic a lot less tasks to keep up with. That they really are just making sure you're not going to, you know, burn your life down without a safety net. I
Yeah.
mean, lots of people that have quit their job and sold their house and traveled across the country, and it was fine. They did just fine with that. Their inner critic weighed in and said, "Yeah, okay, well, here's how much money we have in the savings account, and here's, here's all the ripcords we can pull for the safety nets." So that's the thing, is that if you have all of these files, these incomplete cycles that are constantly telling you you're not lovable, you don't belong, you don't have what it takes, then your inner critic has a lot of work to do. And I just want to, that's what I hope the freedom that people get when this book is to kind of reduce the task load. Their inner critic is overworked. And so let's reduce the job description and reduce the job responsibilities and leave them on the board to remember the good old days. Because if you think about it, in that role, the inner critic could also help build compassion so that when you encounter somebody that still has a lot of those negative beliefs, then what if your inner critic reminds you, oh, remember what it used to be like? It used to be very loud in your head and constant buzzing, and then you could have compassion for somebody that hasn't been on their journey yet. And you could share this book with them.
I'll be honest. This part still seems a little more out of reach in the two freedoms. I don't know. It's something about reclaiming my buttons. I'm like, yeah, I see it. But something about like repurposing the inner critic, at least for me, that one's definitely like a little harder to wrap my brain around. I don't know if anybody else is feeling that, but
Oh, I can totally relate, because a couple years ago I would not have believed it was true, but I've seen it. I've not only seen it for myself, but I've seen it for others, and it really is possible.
that's cool.
Yeah.
So I think there is one more type of freedom that we can talk about today in particular. That's less related to your book, more
Mm.
related to holiday, the Independence Day type freedom.
Mm.
What comes up for you whenever you think about sort of like American freedom?
Man, that's super interesting because, over the last couple of years, I've been really active with a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy work for housing. And I see that the rules of society were written by white people. I am now acutely aware of how freedom isn't freedom for all. Um, I recognize that while the American Revolution, we were victorious, less than 100 years later, our country was embroiled in the Civil War because we didn't resolve those freedom issues for everyone. And then 100 years after that, from 1776 to 1865 to 1965, and we are fighting the civil rights, and then I've also in the
Fighting
last
for
year
civil rights.
fighting for civil rights. Yes, that's what I meant, the civil rights movement. And I'm also in the last year began to get involved with the League of Women Voters, and women have only had the right to vote for 103 years now. And there are still so many areas where women struggle and fight for freedom. I mean, it's mind-blowing to me that I believe it's 1976 before women were able to have a checking account by themselves. I was born in 1973. I'm not that old, y'all. And to imagine that it has been within my lifetime, less than 50 years ago, since we were able to just have a checking account and a bank account all on our own without having a male sign, that's mind blowing. And so there are ways in which, we're, it's still not freedom for all. And I think what comes up for me is the frustration I have with people that believe that this is a zero sum game, and that for women and people of color to have equity and to be equals in this game of American life, this game of Western society, that somebody has to lose. And it's in some ways, especially as somebody with a business major, it's just ludicrous to me because I'm like, wait a minute, but do you understand that if we had people were able to earn a living wage, there would be more dollars that could be spent in business establishments, right? There would be less people that would be on government welfare. Like, do you understand that the ability to give people actual freedom, economic freedom, would be, I mean, I forget how many trillion dollars of lost GDP America alone gets because we don't have a living wage for everyone. And so it's such a conflicting feeling for me because I'm such a, believer in democracy. I'm a capitalist through and through, and am not a corporatist. And I will probably go off on people that are like, nah, capitalism. I'm like, no, 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 no. Right now, we do not have capitalism. We have like
As like
shareholderism.
shareholderism.
Shareholderism, like that is the all glory to go to the shareholder of corporations, people that contribute small amounts of money by buying stock that are not contributing, versus the people that are actually contributing their labor to the business are prioritized less than the people that contribute this amount of stock. And it's just, you know if you go all the way back to capitalism's beginning, where it was the ability for someone to create a good or service and add value to the marketplace, and they could exchange that good or service for, you know currency, which is what we trade in our modern society. That was good. What is not good is over prioritization of corporations and the over prioritization of shareholders, and the fact that there are corporations in America that use our streets, that they use our police force and our fire departments, and they do not pay any kind of income tax. They use our entire society, and they don't have to pay American federal income tax, and that's garbage. And I think that that is the kind of thing that has just wrecked capitalism in America. And so it's very hard because I hear my friends that are democratic socialism, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm married to a Canadian. I'm telling you, there are some things about it that don't work. And there are some things about our system that don't work. And so it's a lot. I'm also um I'm such a student of history. You know, when I was in England and I got to go to the Churchill War Rooms, I've been to the Kennedy Presidential Library. There are some people who were influential in history. And what's interesting is that most of them were horrible humans. um, it's so fascinating to me. It's almost like you can't be a nice person and take on, you know, like for Churchill, you can't take on Hitler, right? And believe that you can win. I don't actually understand what that's about. Why the people that make the most biggest impacts in history have been kind of just like not the best humans. But they also were people of their time, right? So they weren't that unusual for their time. You know, it'd be interesting. But then I think in our culture, in our current culture, who are we gonna look back 50 years from now and think that was one of the great leaders? I'm looking around, looking for that person. And so, and maybe it's because we're all trying to be better humans that there won't be the Churchills and the Kennedys and the Lincolns of the world. I don't know. Maybe Roosevelt was a nice guy. I have no idea, actually. He's on my list of people to dive deeper. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. I know Teddy was a mess, Roosevelt. But he also did a lot of good. So I think there's this like balance, and maybe that's the whole thing of freedom, is that there is a balance. And I know that there are places in the world that you absolutely will never ever ever be able to buy a house and never ever ever be able to get ahead. And if you were crazy smart and you were born in those different societies, then you have no hope. So I know that America, there is hope. I know there's a lot of people that like hate on Christianity, and there's certainly some Judeo-Christian values that have gotten warped in America. But I also know that there's places in the world under different religious rulers where women are still property, where girls aren't allowed to have education. And so
One of the things, though, that I think on that makes America unique is that we, as much as people like to say it, we are not a Christian nation. We are a nation where people have the freedom to choose their religion. And there are places that is not allowed. And so even whatever your religion is, if you don't agree with your neighbor, you get that here. You get to not agree with your neighbor. You get to have a different religion, and that isn't available to everybody. And I think that that's something that
well,
is
and I think
really
even in
special.
places that I think there are places where you can disagree with your neighbor, but you can't disagree with people in power. You know,
Sure.
that it's dangerous to disagree with, you know, Putin, for instance. That's dangerous. And so I'm glad we have it. It's interesting to travel, especially in Europe, and see kind of some versions of it, of the American experiment. It's fun that people still think of us kind of as an experiment. And if you think of that, that we are an experiment, and I talk a little bit about goal setting being an experiment, there are some variables that we changed in the 80s that need to be tweaked again, and we need to tweak our variables. And there are some variables that we changed in the 15 to 20 to 24 timeframe that we need to like absolutely like, oh nope, that part of the experiment failed. And so we need to keep tweaking. And what I meant to say about the Churchill, the Kennedys, I am still enough of a fanatic that I believe that one person can change the world. The reason why, even though Arkansas drives me absolutely crazy when the legislature is in session, is that I know that in Arkansas, there are only like 3 million people here. I can make a difference. And so, and I've talked to somebody who was from Boston, Massachusetts, and she said that there's like hundreds of people that are politically active and educated. And so she's like, she's one of many. And when she moved back to Arkansas after 50 years, it's so empowering and inspiring to be able to be one person and make like huge changes here, because we are such a small state. And I think when we can make a change here, then we can make a change in our Congress. And I think voting matters. And I think every single vote counts and every single vote matters. And so that is what makes America the most glorious, beautiful experiment.
I love it.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July. Go celebrate your Independence Day.
Watch me a little Will Smith.
Yeah, the Independence Day movie, at the end where the whole big speech. Anyway, thanks for chatting about freedom today, Angela. And let's just, as a reminder, in case you forgot from the top, tomorrow, likely, you guys could pre-order the book.
And just so we know what it means to pre-order the book, when you pre-order the book, you'll be able to go on my website and you'll be able to record your transaction and you'll get an advanced digital copy. Everybody.
And you can join the launch team.
That's right.
And get some extra perks and bonuses that will be all written out on the website.
Yep.
I don't say them all here because they're not all finalized just yet, but they will be by the time this episode drops. So, thanks for joining us. Any sort of last thoughts as people go out?
Man, I just kind of want to say, like, as much as I've talked about all sorts of other things, I just like love is the answer. Like, I really, truly, I love sharing information. I love the people that we encounter. I love being able to offer freedom. And the reason why it was freedom from the crap in your head versus free yourself is that you do have to it is an offer to people to be able to go on their own hero's journey. And I just send this with so much love.
I love it. Thanks everybody for listening. We hope you guys go and have a freaking awesome day.